A very pleasant good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the Chronicles, and this is Rita Gadi. Today we move from the metropolis to the island of Mindanao. Why are we going that far? There's so much heat already everywhere. It's not just the weather, but we have the Balikatan exercises, which started the other day. We have India coming in with its missiles, etc., saying that they're also here to help us defend ourselves and launching, verbally at least, an attack against China. Then we have still the increase in the conflict that's going on in Ukraine. Not to mention, of course, that there are other places in our world where you have all of this eyeball to eyeball, as they would call it, face to face confrontations, and then, of course, the use of violence and so forth. This is very sad. So that is why we are moving on to another level so that we can at least take a break, hopefully, from the conflict that surrounds us and come to the island, which very seldom we speak of and very seldom we understand to this day, but that which is very important. This is the island of Mindanao. And then, of course, our program title is Islam and Our Lives. So why so are we discussing this at this particular stage? Because there is much to learn among each other and among religions, much to learn about our brother Muslims, and much to learn about ourselves. Well, we have the word Moro. That is why you have the BARM, which is now the territorial location and the demographics and the population that we have in southern Philippines, the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region of Muslim Mindanao, or the BARM as they call it. But the key word there is the Moro. And time again, we have tried to trace where this word is coming from. You have the Webster Dictionary now mentioning the Moro are the Muslims coming from southern Philippines. But if you go further back in the etymology of this word, then you have the Lamentations that spread throughout the Iberian Peninsula when the Moros from northern Africa overwhelmed Spain and Portugal in the 8th century. So these were the Moros at the time, the Maurus as in the Latin word, but the Moors from Morocco. That was the northern part of Africa at the time. Well, the Moro for me, coming from Mindanao, was a neighbor, either from Pagalungan or from Pikip. Or the Moro was a patient of my father's surgeon who was having an appendix removed, or a son that's being circumcised, or a daughter or a wife that's going to give birth by cesarean section. So they needed a surgeon or at least an operating room to manage this. That was the Moro for me at that time. And then, of course, I also had the chance to have very close Moro friends. I had a tennis match player at the old NARIC. NARIC was the National Administration for Rice or something. It's called NARIC. That also gave birth to the RCA, which is the Rice and Corn Administration, which also is the grandmother of what we now know as the National Food Authority, or the NFA for that matter. So there was a tennis match player, the wife of one of the mayors of one of the Muslim towns, or the towns predominantly Muslim. And we played tennis at the old NARIC compound. It was headed then at the time, the NARIC was headed by a Respicio, the father of the Respicio that we know today. So that is how old I can date myself. Can you imagine that? Or the Moro was a regular guest who came to my house in Kidapawan for dinner. And we listened to the Beatles at the time, which was the trend. Or perhaps we reminisced about the Greenwich Village in New York because some of them studied in New York University. And then, of course, the Moro of my past was either the child of a DATU with royal blood, as we knew them then, whose veins from the Rajawayans and the Rajamudas were actually our friends. Or the Moro was a peasant who was sent as a scholar to the Middle East to study more about the Quran and to study Arabic, so that as they evolved from one study in their Islam theology, they could now come back as bishops or archbishops, if you would call them that, imams. They could read the Quran in Arabic and also Islamic theology that they could preach in the mosques and to the people and to the peasants. So that was the Moro that I knew at the time in the 60s and 70s. And also, as I've said, the Moro, if descended from royalty, was decked during ceremonies. They were decked in yellow and purple, and they had these beautiful malongs, these wide tube skirts that we know, and sometimes we wore them even, and they had gold inlaid in their teeth, and this was matched by the gold bangles that they had as neck pieces. And of course, they had a retinue of attendants that followed their every move. And so the rest of the lower class were loyal subjects who spoke only when addressed to and were mostly lesser educated but experts in trading, selling, merchandising, and many of whom applied the celibacy for trade and barter, because then we had a flourishing barter trade with the neighboring southern island countries. The Moro at my time, that was 60s, 70s, was also the politician. He was either the governor or the congressman or the senator of the biggest province of the country at the time, which is now actually 4 divisions of Cotabato, Lanao del Sur, Sulu, Basilan, or Tawi-Tawi, and also now part of the Bangsamoro regional autonomous government. So it was the Moro then that lorded it over these regions for centuries past and on to the formation of our present republic. There was no other person from outside the Moro tribe that could win in an election against any of them. And I know this from personal experience, really. So the Moro then, as we know them today, was not called a Moro, but simply a Magindanaoan or a Maranaoan or a Tausug, a Yakal, a Samal, or the more exotic names of the region. And the Moro then coexisted in peace and pleasant commonality wherever they were located. So the identity of the Moro, which originally referred to the Black Arabs from Maure in the central plains of Algeria and portions of Morocco of northern Africa, predating Islam, some of them in time, and their conversion to the faith was complete. And you have the Al-Andalus, which became the center of the Muslim rule. We know it in Spanish as Andalusia, and that was the center of their trade, culture, science, and intellectual activity, which blossomed into amazing heights. That their influence of creative thought was actually that which inspired the writings of many of our Catholic theologians, St. Thomas Aquinas, for instance, and the vast world of rational discourse that also had origins in the early days of the Islamic civilization. And it was during this period of excellence and sophistication in thought and lifestyle that people of different faiths, that the Jewish, the Christians, and the Muslims too, coexisted in a spirit of mutual tolerance and enjoyed a very healthy cultural exchange among themselves. So reason, not force, was the correct modus operandi for Christians in relationship with Islam. And that was the dictum of that particular period. But with the end of the Muslim presence in Andalusia, or Al-Andalus in 1492, and the Christian reconquest of the territories of the Islamic civilization that spread all the way from North Africa, all the way up to the Middle East and Europe, Central Asia, India, Malaysia, and now Mindanao in the Philippines. So the Moro acquired another identity. First, it was the enemy in the eyes of Spain and Portugal, but now we have another view of the Moro when Magellan landed in the Philippines, a Portuguese sailing under the Spanish flag, and then he met our Rajas, our Datus, and our rulers of the in Homonhon and in Mactan, and then the identity of the Moro resurfaced as the Muslim invader of their motherland in Spain or in Portugal. So let us look at the Moro today. And we would have to remember the origins of that history that go with the name and see the other face of the Moro today, resurrected with the insistence to carve out a future from a past and a present where we can have now what we know as the Bangsamoro autonomous region of Muslim Mindanao. So this is not a vacuum from which the word Moro comes from. It has a long history, as I said, from way back until 1492 when they came over to crossing the Mediterranean. Now we have the different tribes of the Moros, if we would call them that, the Bajau, the Iranon, the Jamampun, the Kalagan, Kalibugan, Magindanaon, Maranao, the Tausug, the Molbog, the Palawani, the Samal, the Sangil, the Yakan. All of this, how many are they? 18 Islamic tribes, as a matter of fact. And so we have there the Muslim majority territory, which is now the Bangsamoro. That is exactly where that word is coming from. The state, the nation of the Bangsa, that's the state of the Moro, where the Muslim majority territory is occupied by the Muslims. I'm sorry, I'm redundant. It's a Muslim territory, actually. But then again, we ask the question, if that is the case, and you only have the provinces in the south that are considered as part of the BARM, what happens to the Muslim territories here in Luzon? Like, for instance, well, portions of Green Hills in Crame, Maharlika Village, Echage in Manila, and several others where they're located in Baguio, Novaliches, and in Pangasinan, where they're also doing their own trading and mercantile work. So there you have, well, a question that I always raise. If the Bangsamoro refers to the Muslim majority territory, what happens to the other portions of our country where you also have Muslims located? But I'm going ahead of the title of our program, which is Islam in Our Lives. So here we are giving credit to a civilization that has blossomed and increased as far as the knowledge of science, technology, in that early part, as a matter of fact, several of our sciences, architecture, engineering, mathematics, and several others that we have learned from them, medicine also, and the gift of healing, and so forth. So that is how Islam has come to be known as one of the greatest civilizations of that particular period for several hundreds of years. And as I've said, why can't we just continue and live together the way the Islam faith has also dictated on their followers, that Islam is the brotherhood in peace of everyone. So that is how we should look at it, Islam in our lives, as a matter of fact. So if the oldest sultanate, Muslim sultanate in our country can be found in Sulu, with connections from Borneo, Brunei, and Sabah, with the Islam faith coming in from the Indonesian islands, then we should also recognize the fact that we are greatly influenced, not just in Mindanao, but throughout the country, as a matter of fact, with the Islam religion. We have Manila, which was then under the kingdom of Raja Sulaiman, who burned his kingdom, so that when he learned that Legazpi was coming in with all its big ships and coming for the conquest of Manila, he decided to burn his his kingdom so that they would not benefit from whatever flourished in that particular area. And this was along the Pasig River. Maynilad was the first word, in fact, where you had this the flowers coming from the river. So that was where originally you had that term called Maynilad, the place where the flowers were flourishing. But I'm speaking of Raja Sulaiman. Then we also go all the way up north. In what manner, not the queen, not the Raja, but the queen, where you had Princess of Duha also establishing her kingdom. And then several others along the way, all the way up to Cebu, Mactan, and several areas. And of course, in Homonhon, where you had this encounter, violent as it may be, between Magellan and Lapu-Lapu. So that is just trying to briefly say how the Moro has been part of our history. Perhaps we do need to get back to how it has influenced the lives of many Filipinos, but in that manner, not just religiously, but also in the manner of living life. As a matter of fact, that is why the title of our program is Islam and Our Lives. There are many things that we can learn from this, although, as we can say nowadays, the state of Islam, especially Islamic education, also, and this is particularly in Muslim Mindanao, so there is some kind of a, well, I wouldn't want to criticize this, but there is an uneven kind of a proliferation of Islam as a religion and as a way of life that really ought to be taught as well in the madrasa, in the schools for the Muslims, because then we really have to have the grounds and the roots effectively founded so that Islam as a way of life can really flourish the way it was intended to do so. Because Islam is a complete system. It is a complete way of life. And we have to understand this insofar as the manner by which the religion is being considered, not just a belief, not just a faith, but as I've said, the manner by which they live. The several pillars of their religion, for instance, like praying 5 times a day, going for the Hajj, and several others of the celebrations, religious celebrations that they honor. But that is where it is important to understand that Islamic law, where we have the Sharia courts now established, should also be part of a way of life that all of us could actually learn from and perhaps even model this, because as a way of life, then there is the system of justice, and which is not very complicated. For instance, like now there is such a long debate whether we can have a divorce law. We are a predominantly Catholic Christian country, and that is where the debate is coming from. Although a lot of predominantly Catholic and Christian countries also have divorce, but here there seems to be some hesitancy to have this enacted into a law. But in Islam, it is easier said than done, as a matter of fact. A husband or a wife will merely have to declare, I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you 5 times, and that's it. No hustle. And then, of course, the partitioning of properties and all of this does not go into the difficult task of looking into who inherits what, whether there are children born out of wedlock and so forth. And that is what we have now complicating many of the separations, legal separations, annulments that has been undertaken by our civil code. And that is why if only we could understand and really get into practice the Islamic law of divorce, and perhaps it would be simpler in a way. And that is why I keep on mentioning it is important to know some of the ways and means by which religion, as we know it, could also be our way of life, the way Islam is a way of life for those believers. So again, we have all of these injunctions, for instance, in politics. But in Islam, you also have this. But what is important for them is, in a government, they have the consultation with the elders, which is very important for the leaders. So it is not just merely a decision of one man or a decision of a council. It is a decision of the elderly likewise being consulted. And that is where tradition and all of these rituals of understanding what all the things that are being accepted in the past, which have lasted as part of the peace and the quiet and the progress of individuals. Then you have the application of all of this, which is now hardly ever followed. So you have, for instance, the democratic way of life, for the people, by the people, of the people. Not in Islam. In Islam, it is for God, according to Allah, according to the Quran, according to the Word of God. So there is the very strong connection with what God would have wanted us to be, and that is how we should govern ourselves and relate to each other. It is not for the people, by the people, or of the people. It is for, by, and for, in accordance with God's rule. And how many times have we gone through this in many of our programs in the past? And perhaps I should do this even more often. How do we bring God back into our lives? How do we bring God into governance? How do we bring God into Congress? In other words, how do we bring God into the moral values that should be the number one priority in the way we enact laws, in the way we treat each other, in the way our courts should be administered. I am not saying, for instance, that we could change all of this, but the moral and ethical values, which are so important in the way we can be able to distinguish what is good and what is bad, what is right and what is wrong, that is prevalent and very strong in the Islamic way of life, because all of their conduct on a day-to-day basis will be in accordance with what the will of God is. And definitely the will of God is for the good of the individual, for the good of the collective community, for the good of the nation or the state that they govern. So that is where we can have Islam as a way of life, so that we can have that strong relationship with the morality and the ethical values that should really rule above everything else. Time was when we were told that our early codes of conduct or our early laws, the Maragtas, the Kalantiao, were actually moral laws. They were very strictly adhering to what is good and what is right, not according to how we interpret what is legal and, in our sense of justice, the way the Romans, for instance, have it in Roman law to give everyone what is his due. The two is to determine what is one's due. Anyway, so let's get back to what I was trying to lead on early on, which is how we now look at Mindanao and the Moro land, if you would call it, the Bangsamoro, not simply as the big Magindanaon or the Maranao or the Tausug or the Yakal or the Samal, and whatever exotic names they may still carry, but actually the identity of what they were before when they belonged to that particular Muslim rule and culture where science and intellectual activity blossomed for so many hundreds of years, coexisting in a spirit of mutual tolerance and, of course, enjoying a very healthy cultural exchange among themselves and among the Christians in relationship with the Islamic faith. So that was a dictum of that period. And as I've said, it's slowly disappearing today in many Muslim countries and Muslim practices. And let us pray that in Mindanao, for instance, which is supposed to be the Bangsamoro Muslim territory in how many provinces? 5 provinces, 18 municipalities, and about several hundred barangays. That is where the identity of the Moro should resurface in accordance to what we know of it in history as coexisting in peace, and from peace, progress and prosperity for themselves individually and for each other collectively. So that is how we could look at the Moro today, who would have us remember for its origins and its history, so that in their name and in their face, we may be able to recognize likewise ourselves, Islam, in our lives, not as a faith and not as a religion, but in a manner of speaking, a way of life, where we adhere to the principles and the beliefs that God would have wanted us to follow. What was it in the gospel, in the Catholic Mass this morning, for instance? I am the way, the truth, and the life. So in such a way, then we have the word of God, actually, that should be our way, our truth, and our life. So you could see the parallelism that I am speaking about, in which, as I've said, we need to understand and remember. Do I already have Secretary TILLAH? Oh, yes. Okay. So can we have him on video already? Oh, hello. Good afternoon. Can you see? Is this a live video? Can we have, pardon? Okay, via phone. Did he, Secretary Dato Almarin TILLAH, good afternoon.
Attending the 503rd anniversary of the Battle of Mactan of Lapu-Lapu,
Oh my
the
goodness.
greatest Filipino hero.
Yes, indeed. So I gave a long background actually of the word Moro and how this is adopted now in what we have in Mindanao. I have had questions regarding this, Secretary Tila, because you see, they define Bangsamoro as the Muslim majority territory, right?
Yes.
Muslim majority territory. That is why we have, I listed it down. We have the provinces of Lanao del Sur, Maguindanao. We have something like 63 barangays in my province, in North Cotabato. Then we have the island provinces of Basilan, Sulu, and Tawi-Tawi, which are supposedly the Muslim predominant territory, Muslim predominantly territory. And then you have now the inclusion of Cotabato City because that's where the government center was during the Tripoli Agreement. And that was included, I think, sometime in 2020. So these are the areas where you have the Muslim predominant. But then I said, I questioned why Echage is not included, Maharlika Village is not included, Krame, which is adjacent to Green Hills, where you have the shopping mercantile, predominantly Muslim, etc. So I still have that question posed, and maybe someday there will be some look into this. Secretary Tina, how do you feel about it? Hello, sir, can you hear me? Secretary Tila, can you hear me?
Yeah. Very faintly. Hello. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Did you hear what I said earlier when I was questioning what the meaning of Bangsamoro is, which is the predominantly Muslim territory? I said, but why are other Muslim predominant territories not included? Why only those in Mindanao? And why is the adjective Muslim Mindanao? Why is the word Mindanao given an adjective as Muslim? You know, Mindanao has a population of what? Uh, I have it somewhere. 26 million, 27 million, as a matter of fact, 27 million Filipinos, and only 4 million are Muslims. So, why is Muslim an adjective of Mindanao? When you say Bangsamoro, Muslim Mindanao, okay, it's the autonomous region, but you still have that adjective. So, how do you see this, Secretary Tila?
Well, as Muslim Filipinos, I think unity in diversity must be more pronounced than anything else now, because we have our republic and we are citizens of this republic now, and the war footing before of the MNLF, then carried over by the MNF, they have put this to rest already with the first organization of the organization of the ORC, of Office of the Regional Commissioner under the late President Marcos. So there are two regions, and then followed the President Aquino, the ARMM, Autonomous Region Muslim Mindanao, and now we have the farm Bangsamoro Autonomous Region Muslim Mindanao. So a new page in Philippine political history must have been already, done. So I think we have to focus now on how to contribute to this nation building, national unity, as advocated by President Bongbong Marcos. But again, justice is the essence of all this. And as the late Dean Cesar Mahul said, that if Muslims are treated justly in any society they are in, and it becomes a responsibility for them to support that government or that society.
Exactly. So we now have 5 provinces, 116 municipalities. We have 2 cities, and we have something like 2,490 barangays. Okay, so that is what we know as the Bangsamoro. autonomous region. Now you're talking about the importance of how we can have the continuance of progress, knowing that the Islam faith actually is precisely founded on the justice system that we understand it to be as peace and progress, and of course the importance of consultation with the elders and the importance of the justice system, which we now have the Sharia courts, and then we have the madrasa schools and all of this. So let's treat this just uh, tangentially or perhaps even seriously. How are the madrasa schools functioning now, and of what effect do they have now that we have the Bangsamoro state there, the autonomous region? Has it improved the quality of education of our children? Has it contributed to the enlightenment of the greater number of our young people that are now moving into careers, actually? So, how are the madrasa schools?
Well, during the up to the end of President Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo's watch, there was this emphasis on the madrasa system. As a matter of fact, one of our brothers, Pantun Abbas Jr., was undersecretary for precisely the madrasa system. And now it has, since I think President Noynoy Aquino, we don't have that emphasis anymore. But what is important here is that the madrasa, or even the teaching of Arabic and the different 57 Muslim countries in the Ummah have this Arabic as a language, and I think if we bring that to fore and have that adapted, just like the Spanish law which we had before, later on was removed, could help in our diplomatic foreign relations with the 57 Muslim countries. And actually we have scratched the surface of this very important relationship because of the presence of big minority in our country, the Muslim population.
Exactly. So the madrasa has its own curricula, as you said, also mainly also the study of Arabic, so that there is a better understanding of the different sutras and passages of the Quran, so that there could actually be an internalization of Islam as a way of life. I have always mentioned how important it is, especially for those who do not belong to the Islam religion, to understand the value of having your connection with God, your connection with moral values, as part of your waking up. When you start praying, for instance, 5 times a day, with all the different rituals that you perform, with your connection with your family, with your wife, with your husband, with your children, your connection with the community, your connection with economics and business, the way you make loans, the way you borrow money to invest in something, everything that you need for an activity of a good life is connected. Is connected to Islam, is connected to your faith. And so that is how the importance of having this as part of the madrasa curricula is so important. As you said, it is not being followed anymore, or is it still necessary?
Yes, Sister Rita, it has been not given so much emphasis anymore of late by sitting administration. And I think it will be a good policy for the Philippine government to bring back this madrasa system in place and have Arabic as a language from the elementary, intermediate, high school, and even college level is a course in Arabic, and it will be a very good kind of preparation for the young people once they reach certain levels of in their career. Because the 57 Muslim countries is a very important sector for us to relate. And then we have reasons to be in close relationship with them in all aspects. As a matter of fact, in my sojourn recently to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, where I performed the Umrah pilgrimage, I was invited by the World Muslim League, the Arabica, to attend the conference in Makkah. And during that visit, I was given the very proper and significant recognition in that conference. And from that start of the conference, I was able to relate with the top Arabica officials in Makkah, and I took up this precisely our concern for education and training, and they were very interested to listen to this. And I also mentioned precisely the madrasa and the setting up of madrasa schools, and also the mosque in many areas where they are not or not existing. And second meeting I had arranged by the Saudi ambassador in the Philippines, which I requested, was my meeting with the OIC, Organization of Islamic Cooperation, which is based in Jeddah. I was able to have a dialogue with the Secretary General of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, and I only brought one main issue into the discussion, which is to have Muslim Filipino representation in the OIC. Because now we have the MNLF and the IMLF already with government, and so to be inclusive, I said to expand that kind of participation at the OIC level for now Muslim Filipinos, not just MNF or MF, but Muslim Filipinos. And this is very much taken, seriously by them, and they expect my correspondence as the interim president of the Muslim Association of the Philippines to proceed. And the last international Islamic institution of consequence, the Islamic Development Bank, they was invited to have a dialogue with them in their headquarters in Jeddah. And during this dialogue, I knew before, when I was working in the kingdom at the Saudi Airlines, I was able to find out from the charter that there's a specific provision for assistance to Muslims in non-Muslim countries, which fits our situation, the Muslims in the Philippines. And so I pursued that discussion with the officials of the IDB, principally the Vice President for Operations at the headquarters. And they said that it is there, and for us to correspond, and so they can attend to it. And I was asking if there are certain amendments to the charter or new policies. And when the Vice President spoke of health, I immediately introduced the idea, which I already sent to the President, to set up a PDS prototype in the Muslim communities, one in Zamboanga City to cater to the health needs of our brothers and sisters in Sulu, Tawita, and Basilan, the island provinces, one in Cotabato City, for the farm region mainly, and of course in Marawi City. So I presented these three proposals to the Islamic Development Bank for possible consideration, and once they accede and approve of it, we'll have the institutions established. And I'm pursuing this with our Muslim brothers who are with me in the socioeconomic involvement of Muslims in the Philippines.
That's
The
very
the President,
yes.
as I know him up close and personal for the last 29 years, in heart and in mind the well-being of his Muslim brothers and sisters and their communities. But you see, even with that good intention he has limitations in terms of the resources at his sleeve. So I said, if you will be able to help our president, who is very concerned about our Muslim brothers, sisters, and their communities, in terms of this infrastructure that will be set up on education, health, and also, you see, really in the Philippines, as a government, we pursue some assistance from countries who have this interest, high interest rates appended to the loans that we apply. And if your bank, the Islamic Development Bank, which is Islamic, and therefore rabbit or interest is un-Islamic, you don't, add that to the loan portfolio. So I think our government will be able to get more of this kind of assistance without the inclusion of interest and on a short-term loan basis. And there were all reads about this, and we'll be pursuing this and we'll be presenting to them proposals in all the three areas along feasibility studies. I have requested our friends at the University of the Philippines in the main and the scholars to help us draw some proposals and, of course, feasibility studies for these proposed programs and projects that we discussed in Jeddah and Makkah.
That's very interesting. We had some time back, I don't know if it still exists, we had something like the Mindanao Development Authority that was headed by Kabili, who converted into Islam. We know him as Karim Sidri, remember him? So that was supposed to spearhead a number of these development programs and loans coming from Islam countries, Muslim countries coming into Mindanao. So I don't know if it still exists and what has happened to this, because we also had the Islamic Bank, how they called it. We had a bank before for
Amana Bank. The Amana Bank.
The Amana Bank. I'm sorry. Yes, the Amana Bank is it still functioning? Because as you said, that is where the interests are no longer. It's not actually. It's not allowed in Islam to have yung patong ng interest. Anyway, so do we still have this? As you were mentioning, your initiative now to get into more investments coming in. Do we still have the Amana Bank and the Mindanao Development Authority? And what has happened to the programs that it had in the past?
Yes. So I have sent this memoranda to the President after my sojourn in the Middle East, particularly the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, after the Rabita World Muslim League conference in Makkah. And I am waiting for the President to give me the marching orders as to how to proceed later on the proposal.
That's very good. Now we go to another concern, which I think was also part of what was done as far as the bar is concerned, which are the Sharia courts. They're still functioning. We still have Sharia law predominantly in effect in the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region.
Yes, as a matter of fact, in reference to the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, when we bumped each other during the persona of the President, when he heard my name, he must have heard me about me early on, to talk to me before the President's persona and to assist him in the Sharia, program. And I told him we'll have Muslim scholars put together and sit down with him, and we were able to discuss this one-on-one when I had an appointment with him at the Supreme Court, and he was very concerned with the strengthening of this area, law, and of course the exam, for those who will be in the courts, Sharia.
Yes.
He was very interested in fairness. He was the first ever a law Chief Justice that was very keen in looking to the success of the Sharia system in the Philippines.
Yeah, okay. I'm having a call here. Can you just text me whoever is calling me? Because I have a program right now. Anyway, that is good when you're able to talk to the Chief Justice regarding this. But uh, is there any difficulty having Sharia law and our own Philippine laws get together in a way that it is part of the bar examinations for that matter, or is it separate? How does this go? What is the procedure for this?
For what, Sister Rita?
No, I was asking about. Pardon?
Hello?
Yes, yes. Did you hear my question, sir?
Well, I think the House of Representatives and the Senate will have to look keenly into this. No? But the other issue is that if I may, which I discussed with the Vice President, Secretary of DepEd, Sister Sarah Duterte, thing about the preparation of the young people in terms of science and math. Because when I was consultant of President Dodong Limenso of UP, we found out that in the UP college admission test, many of our young people from the ARM region then were not able to make it to the UPCAT because of the poor preparation in math and science. All other courses or subjects, they were okay. And so the need for was sharing this with the Secretary of Education, Sarah, is that there's a need to strengthen the secondary level preparation of our students by having a teachers training program, heightened and strengthened our secondary school teachers. Because what comes out of that, the young people from that level will be mainly what is, the preparation of the secondary school teachers along math and science. And he took it very graciously and requested me to try and come up with a pool of young Muslim scholars to help her in the head office and also at the farm area. Just very interested about it. And I'm going to see, as I told her when we last met, when the president was leaving for Germany, I had a few minutes with her, and I told her that after Ramadan, I will see her so I can give her a short list of Muslim scholars that she can harness to help advise her here at the head office and also at the farm region.
That's very good. That's at least touching base with the most important aspect of our education system. That is precisely the reason why the title of our program is Islam and Our Lives, because out of so many historical data that we can gather as part of our curricula, for example, we study the history of America, etc., of Europe, and so forth. Islamic studies is not part of not part of humanities. It's not a subject that we have that is part of a requirement. Because there are so many things that we can learn from that particular civilization, which is now actually being used in many of our universities. Like, for instance, those taking up engineering and all of these sciences. If they can just trace back, these are all part of the Islamic civilization that we had, even in medicine, even in healing, and all of this. And then, of course, the kind of system of government that we have. I mentioned this earlier before the program, Secretary TILLAH. Democracy and the rule of the majority, etc. And then you have this who is government of the people, for the people, and by the people. And I said, if we had Islam in our lives, then it is a government of God, for God, and by God. That is the way our
It
lives
must
should
be more of that.
Pardon?
The moral dimension of it.
Yes, precisely.
I agree with you, Sister Rita.
Yes, I've had two programs already with the question, how do we bring God back into our lives, into our governance, into our leaders? Can you imagine 320 congressmen passing laws which have absolutely, not absolutely, but which hardly touch on the ethical and moral value of what they are actually enacting? So, is it
Yeah,
about
when I was,
the people, by the people?
yeah,
Why not of God, by God, for God? Yes, sir.
yes, Sister Rita, while I was attending the preparation and, of course, the commemoration of the 503 years of uh, Lapu-Lapu, the battle in Mactan, it brought to mind that, he's the first uh, leader that fought the Spanish conquistadores against all the odds. He defended this country in Mactan. And I said, I think it's about time that not only historians, but those who are in the policy level of government to review the priorities in terms of even recognition or anniversary. I think Lapu-Lapu must, take the front seat, not the back seat, and to be highlighted is all in history. Being the first one to take up, arms to defend our country against the Spanish invaders. But this has a really not, attention and support.
Very well said. Anyway, going back to the title of our program, Secretary Tila, and I really wish you the best and pray for the best that you can be able to pursue many of the intents that you have, not only presenting this at the Office of the President, the Department of Education, but also many other departments that can get into our system that will follow a certain degree of ethical and moral standards, which, as I said, Islam, as far as the faith is concerned, should be part of our lives. I just want to read how the cultivation of real Islam in daily life and in individual hearts could be the true beginning of what we know as the Moro nationhood. I am reading here some of the questions raised by the young Moros who raised these questions. And I think this ought to be digested and internalized in many ways by all the departments concerned and also by the executive. Can Islam be lived more faithfully in daily life and mundane affairs? So, can a person be encouraged to remember practical advice from the Holy Quran or
Yes.
the Holy Bible, for instance? Do Moros value time, respect it, and use it wisely? Do Moros respond to cleanliness? All of these are questions. If we subscribe to a holier than thou attitude, do we pray with sincerity 5 times a day? For the Christians, how many times a week, for that matter? So that we do not yield to anger or violence or quick temperance or illegal activities. So, for Moros and non-Moros, the challenge is very real. That is why I say Islam in our lives should be the beginning of the nationhood that we can have, actually, not just in Muslim Mindanao. So we also have this on the local level, for instance. What is more important when we deal with governance? What happens to the leaders, or what happens to the people? Or what happens to what God would have wanted, what Allah would have wanted us to do by right and what is right? So again, can all of us be law abiding according to our best behaviors in Zamboanga, in Manila, in non-Moro areas? It is a challenge to practice this behavior, not just locally, but nationally. So here we get the questions being raised, actually. What is Islam in our lives? A way of life which teaches us to offer everything that we do in accordance with our belief, a belief in Allah, a belief in God, who will only tell us what is right,
Yeah.
not what is wrong. So that is exactly what I'm trying to drive at here.
By the way, Sister Rita, just to update you, I'll be meeting with the Secretary of Foreign Affairs next week, precisely to brief him on the three institutions that I had touched base with and dialogue with in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And so together, and maybe bring in some other departments of government that have something to do with the subjects we have discussed, we will be able to communicate effectively and hopefully be able to harness the assistance of the 57 Muslim countries under the Islamic Development Bank.
Yes, I was going over some of the agreements that our government has entered into early on when we were still dealing with the MIF, MNLF, etc. And then we got to the Tripoli agreement, and then until we got to the Tripoli agreement of 1974 and 76, and then the one in
1996, yes.
Yes, and 1996.
And the late President Marcos Sr.
Yes, and then we also had several of this memorandum agreement with not just with the MNLF and MILF, but also agreements with Muslim countries on several aspects. And do you know how all of this actually begin? In the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most compassionate, etc. We do.
I hope in the next interview with Rita, I'll be in Manila. There's something that I did not know this earlier, celebration of Lapu-Lapu. It was never highlighted. When I knew about it, that's when it came.
Yes, what is important there is we invoke the presence of God in whatever dealings we have with each other and whatever agreements we are signing between countries, between peoples, between organizations, etc. We don't have this in other documents. So that is what I am saying here. Not the religion, but the way of life, where you invoke the presence of God in your everyday activities. And one
in support of the President's call for national unity, that's why at our own initiative, the Muslim level, we are now supporting it through we can call it slogan, unity in diversity, to have all the Muslim tribes together in support of the national government.
Exactly. So I wish you well, Secretary, and I hope that your meetings in the future will zero in on the importance of having our faith be predominantly what is to be considered in our dealings with one another. Because Islam, salam, peace, that is all it is, actually. So, thank you very much for having me. So
I hope to be in Manila in my next interview with you, so I can hear you more, effectively.
Yes, okay. So when you get back, let me know and let's get together. Coffee, breakfast, lunch, whatever. We have a lot to discuss along this line. Thank you very much, Secretary Dr. ALMARIM TILLAH, and thank you for having brought about many of the aspects that we have been aspiring for as far as Moro land is concerned.
Thank you, Sister Rita, as always. Thank you for giving us space in the program. Thank you.
Okay, so this has been your Chronicles, and this is Rita Gadi. And God bless us. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Ba-ba-da-ba-dum, ba-ba-da-ba-dum, ba-ba-da-ba-dum.